In Module 6, Lesson 3, we're going to create our own dot plot. Robert, a sixth grader at Roosevelt Middle School, usually goes to bed around 10 p.m. and gets up around 6 a.m. to get ready for school. That means that he gets about 8 hours of sleep on a school night. He decided to investigate the statistical question, how many hours per night do sixth graders usually sleep when they have school the next day? Robert took a survey of 29 sixth graders and collected the following data to answer the question. Robert decided to make a dot plot of the data to help him answer his statistical question. Robert first drew a number line and labeled it from 5 to 12 to match the lowest and highest number of hours slept. He then placed a dot above 7 for the first piece of data he collected and continued to place dots above the numbers until each number was represented by a dot. We're going to complete Robert's dot plot by placing a dot above the number of the number line for each number of hours slept. If there is already a dot above a number, then add another dot above the dot already there. And then we'll answer the questions using the dot plot. So Robert started with 7. Then we have one for 8 and 5 and 9, another 9, another 9, a 7. I'm going to add it here for our sake. Another 7, a 10, another 10, an 11, another 9, 3 8s, a 12, a 6, an 11, a 10, 2 8s, 3 9s, another 8, a 10, 2 9s, and an 8. Now, using our dot plot, we can answer the questions. What are the least and most hours of sleep reported in the survey of sixth graders? The least was 5 hours, and the most was 12 hours. And notice how quickly and easily we can answer those questions. What is the most common number of hours slept? Well, 9 is the tallest, has the most, so that is the most common answer. How many hours of sleep describes the center of the data? And again, we would say 9 or possibly 8, depending on how we determine that. And of course, we would count. We could also count to find the center. Think about how many hours of sleep you usually get on the school night and answer how your number of hours of sleep compares with the number of hours of sleep from the survey of these sixth graders. So then we have a second set of data that is the number of hours sixth graders sleep when they don't have school the next day. And we're going to make a dot plot of these numbers. And remember, the first thing we need to do is determine the highest and the lowest values so that we know how big our number line has to be. I see a 5 and 13. And when I scan through the rest of the data, I don't see anything lower than 5 or greater than 13. So we'll make a number line that ranges from 5 to 13. And complete the dot plot from there. So in looking at our dot plot, how many hours of sleep with no school the next day describe the center of the data. And I would say 10 is probably the center of our data, simply because there are a lot of hours before 10, but not very many people are represented in that data. So I would say 10, and we could count to locate that, but 10 or 11 is probably the center of our data. What are the least and most hours slept? Least is 5, and the most is 13. Those are very easy to answer because we can see. Do students sleep longer when they don't have school the next day than they do when they do have school the next day? And we can certainly answer they do sleep longer. Because when we look at this dot plot, whose center is 10 or 11, and then we look at the prior dot plot, oh, I had to clear that, I'm sorry. And we think about our prior dot plot, where the center was more like 8, we know that there's 2 hours more. Our center of the data is 2 hours greater already, and most of the data in this dot plot is in higher numbers rather than in the medium or low numbers. A group of 6th graders investigated the statistical question, how many hours per week do 6th graders spend playing a sport or outdoor game? So our data set is listed. This is a sample of 26 6th graders. And to help organize the data, the students placed the number of hours into a frequency table. A frequency table lists items and how often each item occurs. To build a frequency table, you first draw 3 columns. The first column will be the data that you're collecting. In this case, it's the number of hours playing a sport or a game. And then the second column is a tally column. We're just going to put tally marks here. And the third column will be a frequency column. And this frequency column will be where we count up the tallies and put the actual number from the tally marks. So our tally was started at 3. That's the first number in our data set. And we'll just keep on adding to the data. So our frequency table shows the most common number of hours playing a sport would be 3, because there are 7 people who reported 3 hours. And the center of our data seems to be right around 3, and certainly in the lower numbers. The 12 seems to be a very odd number there. Then we're asked to make a dot plot of that frequency table as well. So we're simply taking the information in the data table and transferring it into a dot plot. And visually, it's a lot easier for us to describe the center and find where most of the data is when we put it in the dot plot. Number of hours that describes the center of the data is probably 3. And the number of 6th graders that said they spent 8 or more hours a week playing a sport are 2. There are 2 dots that are 8 or more. The 6th graders wanted to answer the question, how many hours do 6th graders spend per week playing a sport or playing an outdoor game? Using the frequency table in the dot plot, how would you answer the 6th graders' question? Well, we would want to say that the number of hours ranges from 0 to 12, with 3 being the most common number of hours per week. Again, this lesson described how to make a dot plot, and the plot starts with a number line labeled from the smallest to the largest value. Then a dot is placed above the number on the number line for each value in your data. We also described how to make a frequency table, and the frequency table consisted of 3 columns. The first column contains all the values of the data listed in order from smallest to largest. The second column is the tally column, and the third column is the number of tallies for each data value.